Hello, I'm Gillian from Museum on the Mound. With the current COVID restrictions in place, this year's Remembrance Sunday will be very unlike any other, but we'd still like to mark the occasion. And today we're going to look at this. This is the War Memorial here at the Bank of Scotland head office at the Mound in Edinburgh. It was designed by a man called Francis William Dees, and it was unveiled on the 30th of May 1921. It's made of green Egyptian marble with bronze plates, and originally when this was unveiled it had 87 names on it, men who died in the First World War. As you can see, however, we did add to this. Down here we have the names of the men who died in the Second World War. This wasn't its original space. Originally it was on a wall over to my left, beside the main banking hall. It was obviously important that it was seen as people came in and out of what was then a public space. It's very easy sometimes to walk past a memorial like this and see what's really effectively a fairly anonymous list of names. But we know a lot about the people on this memorial thanks to the research of a Lloyds Banking Group colleague, David McNay. Now, David isn't part of the museum or archives team, and this wasn't as part of his job. It was a labour of love done in his own time, and thanks to his research, we can now tell you stories of people on this plaque haven't been told for over 100 years. First person I'd like to look at on this plaque is right up here. His name was Alexander Brooke.
Alexander Brooke was born in 1865, making him the oldest person recorded on this plaque. He was born in Haddington and attended Edinburgh University, gaining an MA in 1887, before being appointed Writer to the Signet in 1891. On top of that, he was County Clerk and Treasurer to the County of East Lothian and an agent for Bank of Scotland in Haddington. When war broke out, he was mobilised as a major, having also had previous experience in the 8th Royal Scots and having been awarded the Volunteer Decoration. In November 1914, he was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and mentioned in dispatches. He died on the 19th of May 1915, following an incident where, while studying a map in a trench, a shell burst next to him, resulting in a fatal head injury. At the time of his death, he was a month shy of his 50th birthday.
Alexander Brooke was the oldest person on this plaque, but David's research has found lots of photos which demonstrate exactly how young many of the men on this plaque were. Indeed, of the 87 names, 15 of the men here were under 20 years old when they died. And one of those men is up here.
Thomas Bauer was born in Glasgow, the son of a banker, and followed his father into the profession when he left school. He wasn't to stay at the bank for long, as by early 1916 he had signed up as part of the Glasgow Highlanders, otherwise known as the 9th Highland Light Infantry. By July that year, Thomas was at the Somme, and on the 15th of July he was part of the attack on High Wood that would cost 174 men their lives, including his own. At the time of his death, Thomas was only 17 years old, meaning he probably lied about his age at the recruiting office, and making him the youngest person on our memorial.
So most of the men on this memorial, they were sent to the front line, they were sent to the trenches and to the battles of the First World War. But one of these men was part of the armed forces in its most dangerous, and indeed the part of the armed forces which had the lowest life expectancy. He's right down here, Howard Watson.
Howard Watson had been employed at the Cooper Angus branch of Bank of Scotland, and in his spare time he was part of the Volunteer Training Corps, a predecessor of the Home Guard. He was commissioned in 1917 as a second lieutenant in the Royal Air Force. Flight was in its infancy, and life expectancy for a pilot was 18 airborne hours. Sadly for Howard, his career was short. On the 8th of May 1918, only a month after qualifying as a flying officer, he was killed in a plane accident. It would seem that two planes collided at height, became locked and turned several times before crashing. There were no survivors. Howard Watson was buried in Cooper Angus Parish Churchyard in one of the largest funerals the town had ever seen. He was 19 years old. The men commemorated on our memorial worked across the length and breadth of the country, but two of the names are of men who worked here at head office and who would have known the hall in which the memorial is very well. One of them I feel an affinity with because he began life where I did, in my hometown of Arbroath. Joseph Hanton was born in 1891 in St Vigins, just outside of Arbroath, and began his career at the Brothick Bridge branch of Bank of Scotland. By 1915 he had moved to Edinburgh to a job at head office, and it was in the capital that he enlisted to the 14th Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. In 1916 his battalion were occupying trenches in France that the battalion war diary recorded were in such bad condition that the mud was waist deep, forcing the men to pass over the top in full view of the enemy. On the 30th of December 1916, probably as a result of these dreadful conditions, Joseph Hanton was killed by enemy machine gun fire. Following his death, the minister of his church, Lady Lone United Free, said of him, "It's difficult to believe that he's gone. He was so pure, so noble, so good, and our poor earth needs such as he so much. To know him was to love him." Joseph Hanton is buried in Herne Farm Military Cemetery. He was 25 years old.
David's research discovered incredible documentation about these men, personal letters, photographs, and in some cases, poems. And that's the case with the next man we're going to look at here. Right up here we have David Douglas Clark.
David Clark was born in Kirkcudbright, one of several siblings born into a family of local bakers. He was academically gifted, gaining 2 bursaries at Johnston School and Kirkcudbright Academy. He joined the bank at the turn of the century and in 1901 sat the Associate Examination of the Institute of Bankers, passing in the top 10 out of a class of 1,800. In 1914 he enlisted in the Cameronians and was sent first to France and then to Gallipoli. In a letter home he writes, "We've been sent to the Dardanelles. We are lying in trenches, heavy shell fire, living in dugouts, digging trenches while bullets are pinging all around. We will soon be going on to the reserve trenches. It's a bit safer there. The food is good, but not as good as in Flanders. Water is very scarce." This was to be his last letter home. On the 28th of June 1915, he was shot and killed at Gully Ravine. Tragically for his family, he was not their only loss. David's elder brother Robert also died while training in the Manchester Regiment. His father later wrote a poem called "My Sons." They fired 3 volleys o'er his grave, the last post soft and clear. They left him for his long, long rest, with many a friendly tear. Our 2 young soldier sons lie dead, far, far apart they lie. David in far-off Gallipoli, here Robert sleeps close by. Our hearts are sad for great the loss fate had for us in store. Sorrow's train hope sweetly sings, we'll need to part no more.
Letters played an important part in the last man we're going to look at today. He's right up at the top here as well. John Dunlop Anderson, aged 20, known to his friends as Jack.
Jack Anderson joined the Bank of Scotland in Peebles, aged 16, and spent 2 years there until he was old enough to enlist into the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve in 1916. He passed as a signalman and joined HMS Bitton on the 1st of February 1917. In April the following year, Jack's ship was involved in a collision with the SS Kenilworth in thick fog off the Isle of Portland. The destroyer sank with the loss of all hands. A court of inquiry later found negligence on the part of the master of the Kenilworth. The letters David discovered that were written to Jack's parents following his death are just too numerous to read in full right now, but each of them describe a well-liked, kind young man who was just beginning his life. To quote from just a few, one says, "The memory of Jack Anderson will always hold a warm place in my heart, as he was a boy of outstanding character, imbued with a strong desire to act the part of all that was true and honest. Of a bright disposition and never-failing courtesy, he endeared himself to all whom he came in contact. In Jack I had the utmost confidence from the day on which I first met him, and it was with much pride I watched him grow from a mere boy to young manhood. His letters to me, from the day on which he joined in the fight for his country's freedom, were couched in such a manly spirit that ofttimes I thought, a mere boy, yet all in all a man. Never but thoughts of warm appreciation and affection can I hold for that bright-eyed, lovable lad. Another says, "You have lost a dear, dear son, and I have lost a good, true pal, one of the very best." It's a cheering thought that there were no goodbyes in his life, only au revoir. And perhaps most movingly of all, the family received a letter from a Belgian soldier who at one time had been a refugee in Peebles. "Please excuse me, I come by letter once more to remember you and the sad end of your dear son Jack. Before I will introduce myself, I am Emile Armand Merton. I was a very great friend of Jack. We used to write very often to each other. He was very, very kind to me. Just like two brothers, he told me his little sea miseries, and I told him my army ones. Truly, dear Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, the death of my own brother could have not grieved me more than my poor friend Jack. Let me please present you my condolences, and share with you and all those for whom Jack was a dear friend with your sorrow. Jack is a hero."
So sadly, that's all we have time to look at today on the War Memorial, but we do have a lot more information about the rest of the names here as well. If you have any ancestors who you think might be on this plaque, or you're just interested in learning some more, please do get in touch with us. But for now, thank you for watching.